Now, honestly, do you really believe a woman should be involved in this? I don't think women should be involved in street crimes or any crimes in any shape or form, not because they're not capable. Once again, I just hold women in higher esteem. It's a man's dirty work. It's not for women. Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing great. All is good and blessed on this end. And as always, we give God all the praise, honor, and glory for that. If you haven't subscribed, please, we're on a march to 1 million. We're almost there. Big giveaway. We're going to start probably November 1st. When we hit 1 million, just want to show our appreciation to all of you who have supported us. It's a pretty big landmark to get there in just about 2 years. And again, thanks to all of you. You have plenty of choices. We appreciate that you tune into our channel. So thank you very much. Subscribe. Very easy. Just push the button. Whenever we think of criminals, we rarely think of women. Especially when we talk about gangsters. We don't think about women gangsters, and honestly, I've been asked many, many times. Matter of fact, I did a video about a woman in Italy who was actually the boss of the family for quite some time, and in Naples, my father's hometown. And that was a rarity. I was kind of surprised. You don't hear much about women involved with the Mafia. In the United States, we didn't have women involved. No women ever got made. We tried to keep them out of everything. We didn't discuss our business with them. It was just kind of our code, our deal, our policy. Were there some women involved? Not really, unless a guy on the street would involve his women's, it wasn't very bright to do that, but if he did, then she got involved in some way. But they were never involved really in our life. And it's not sexist or anything. I just don't believe this is cut out for women. I believe women are in a different category. I hold them in higher esteem. I don't see women, on the street committing criminal activity. Now, somebody that I know who will become a friend, Andrew Tate, he got blasted when he talks about women in a different way. And it's not that we're putting women down if we say that we don't believe they should be involved in criminal activity or they shouldn't be on the street committing crimes. We just hold them in higher esteem. Andrew Tate was, he was thrown off. He was canceled of all the social media platforms. I think even Uber and his banks threw him out. Unbelievable. Because he talked about how he felt about women versus men, about men being men in today's world. And I actually did a kind of a sermon about that on Easter Sunday. What does it mean to be a man's man in 2022? Because in today's society, men are being feminized. No question about it. We see it all the time. We hear it. I get people emailing me about it. I get messages on social media. It's happening. Men are getting feminized, and it shouldn't be. Men should be men, and that doesn't take anything away from women. Like I said, we hold women in higher esteem. We don't think they should be involved in certain things that men are involved in. Not to say they're not capable, not to say they couldn't handle it. We just don't feel that they should be involved. And I don't see women be involved in criminal activity. It's just my feeling. Now, some of you will knock me for it. I get it. But that's how I feel, and I think I can express myself. I think a lot of people agree with that. But anyway, there was some women that were pretty famous, pretty notorious, that got involved with other guys on the street that were gangsters too, and they actually did their thing. I'm going to go through a couple of them today. There's a longer list, but I thought the ones that I'm choosing are kind of interesting, and you got to give these women credit to a degree. So first, we're going to start with Bonnie Parker. Yeah, everybody knows who that is. Bonnie and Clyde, famous. We saw the movies about them, very, very well done. But Bonnie Parker, she was undoubtedly the most famous of all the female gangsters. She was half of the iconic crime duo, Bonnie and Clyde. The two were notorious bank robbers back in the Public Enemy era, when the FBI used to label people as public enemy number 1, number 2, number 3, and that was around 1931 to 1934, and they were celebrities. I mean, there was a lot of publicity about them at the time. Newspapers wrote them up. You heard about it on the radio. They were a wild bunch, Bonnie and Clyde. And Bonnie Parker was born in Rowena, Texas, I believe. Those Texas women, from here, they could be pretty feisty. She earned a reputation for being very smart and very outspoken. And she met Clyde Barrow, I think, in 1930, and she was married at the time, but something instantly happened between the two of them. They hit it off immediately. And apart from all the robberies and the killings, they were killing cops, they were killing everybody at that time. The legend of Bonnie and Clyde grew really in part because of the photo shoot that they did near Joplin, Missouri. And I think they had an agent at the time that was following them that they got a hold of, and they took pictures with them. It was a photo shoot, and they sent it to the newspaper. They wanted it published. And those images, they still inspire reimaginings of their lives. When you see that, you think about them all the time. But like every other gangster that gets involved and stays involved in criminal activity, there's always a bad ending. In their case, huge shootout with the police in 1934, and they were both killed. I think you remember the movie. They were killed outside of their vehicle. The cops found them and they shot them up. There was no mercy. They weren't going to arrest them. They were, number one on the list to go out and kill them. And she was only 23 years old, and Clyde Barrow was 25 at the time. So again, bad ending. What could I say? I don't think women should be involved in something like this. And shame on Clyde Barrow for getting her involved. And, according to the movies that I saw, they never depicted him as being too bright, to bring a girl that he supposedly is in love with to become a criminal and a gangster and start shooting police and robbing banks. Shame on him for doing that. Number two was a woman by the name of Stephanie St. Clair. Very, very interesting. She was called Queenie, and she was in Manhattan. She was in Harlem. And she was known as Madame St. Clair at the time. She was a big figure at the time. It was before my time, but I certainly heard about her. She was an immigrant of French and African descent. She set up a numbers business 10 years after moving into the United States, and she became very protective of her neighborhood. If you were a numbers runner back then, you made some big money, because the numbers business at the time when I was on the street, in my neighborhood, my uncle was running numbers, friends of mine were running numbers, and it was a good deal. The way the numbers run, if you don't understand, they take usually the last three numbers of the attendance of the racetrack on that particular day. And if you choose that number, you place your bet. If that number comes up, you win. And at the time, for 50 cents, if you put 50 cents on a number, you would win $600. I would play $20 on my birthday every single day, 527, 527, 527. And I hit it 3 times, $24,000, and I made sure I got paid from the numbers running back then. So you can make some money. So what was interesting about numbers is that common people played it. Grandmothers, little kids, they all played the numbers because it was a chance for them to make some big money. So it really wasn't seen as a bad thing, but she grew her numbers business, and especially in that neighborhood in Harlem, where people, common people were just trying to make a buck. It was very, very popular. She made a ton of money. And actually, at one point in time, she testified against corrupt cops. She got them fired from the force. She was very protective of her neighborhood. And she even thwarted an invasion when bootlegging was up, and some of the guys were moving uptown to Harlem to try to get into the rackets and the numbers business, and she kept them out. She was able to thwart them. She had an alliance with Bumpy Johnson. That was her guy. Also, allegedly, and I think there's some truth to it, she got involved with Lucky Luciano in a way, and Lucky protected her. So she had Bumpy Johnson, she had Lucky Luciano. Dutch Schultz tried to get into Harlem and get in on some of her rackets, some of her business. She wouldn't allow it. She kept them out, and I'm sure Bumpy Johnson and Luciano were responsible for that. And later on, I heard, when Schultz died, he was dying in a hospital, from a gunshot wound. She sent a note to the hospital that read, "You reap what you sow," and she told that to Dutch Schultz. So she was a pretty big figure back at the time. And when she retired, she handed her operation over to Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy actually got it from her. I think we saw that in Godfather of Harlem, if I'm not mistaken. And he became known as the Harlem Godfather. So interesting story. Next, I thought this was kind of interesting. We have a woman called Opal Mac Truck Long. They nicknamed her Mac Truck, and that's because she was born in Texas, and she earned her nickname Mac Truck because of her size. Although she was a pretty tough woman, I heard nobody said that to her face, but she was a big woman. And she was a member of John Dillinger's terror gang. And she was brought in as the wife of Russell Clark, who was one of John Dillinger's guys, one of his main guys. And she was kind of a caretaker by nature. She preferred to be called Bernice Clark. She cleaned house for them. She cooked for them. She was kind of the mom of the gang, so to speak. And she considered the gang to be her family. But things got kind of sour when her husband was arrested in Tucson, Arizona, I think in 1934. And when they were arresting her husband, she was pretty upset. She attacked the police. She went after him. She was in love with this guy. And later she went to Dillinger and she said, she wanted money because she thought Clark shouldn't have been arrested. And she wanted to file an appeal. She kept badgering him about it. And finally Dillinger got upset with her and kind of, pushed her on the side. She got very upset about that. And, that kind of ostracized her from the gang. And then that summer too, she was arrested. But when she was arrested, she never squealed on anybody. She didn't become an informant. She got parole in 1934 and supposedly lived out her days in Chicago without her husband. I think he remained in prison for quite a long time. So that's it. Next, we have Helen Gillis. She was very, very notorious. She was the wife of Babyface Nelson. She married him, I think, at the age of 16. She had 2 babies at the time. By the time she was 20 years old, she was also one of Public Enemy #1's list. Shoot to kill. You see somebody like that, shoot to kill. You didn't arrest them, you killed them at the time. And she was present at the Battle of Barrington in Illinois on November 27, 1934. And what happened there, Babyface Nelson spotted a cop car, and with Gillis and somebody else, they chased the cop car. They chased it down. They were shooting at the cops, and this led to a shootout, and Babyface Nelson was killed along with 2 police officers. They were crazy back then. They spotted a police car, woman in the car, and they go after the cop car and they start shooting him. What happens? He gets killed along with 2 cops. Stop. Now, honestly, do you really believe a woman should be involved in this? I mean, come on, guys. If you're a guy on the street committing crimes, you're going to bring your wife, your girlfriend, your sister, your daughter into something like this? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. And yet some women, I don't know, but I got to blame the guy, because if the guy says, no, you're not getting involved in this, they don't get involved. But, some guys think differently. What could I say? And she earned her place on the Public Enemy list by harboring her dying husband, supposedly. She got him out of the car and she brought him to safety someplace, and they were looking for him, and she was harboring a criminal. And because of that, she was on the shoot to kill list. She surrendered on Thanksgiving Day. She finally gave it up, and Babyface Nelson died, I think, in her care at that time. She testified against the other guy that was in the car. She was upset with him because I think allegedly he didn't help her. He kind of fled the scene when Babyface Nelson was dying. She actually brought him into some protective place that she found. And so she turned informant, testified against Chase, and she got Chase a life sentence. So that's it. Another woman, tough life for a woman, telling you. Oh, just another thing about Gillis. She actually lived pretty long. She died 50 years after this incident, and she was buried next to Babyface Nelson in Chicago St. Joseph Cemetery. That's another cemetery where a lot of mob guys were buried, and she was buried next to Babyface Nelson. Next on the list, we have Ma Barker. Now, I know you've heard of her. You had to hear of her. I mean, she's been, depicted in movies, and I've heard that name many, many times. Never really got interested enough to look into it, except for now. And she was called Donnie Barker, a.k.a. Kate Barker, and she was considered a merciless matriarch, really tough woman. At 19, she married George Barker, and the two went on to have 4 sons, Herman, Lloyd, Arthur, and Fred. So that was kind of the gang, the group. And the Barkers weren't just a family, they were a crime family. They pulled off highway robberies as early as 1910. And I was watching a television series called Animal House, and I think it was on TNT at one of that. I think it was like 6 seasons, but I really got into it because it was a mother who was like Ma Barker. She was a criminal starting from an early age, kind of a merciless woman involved in killings and robberies and all of that. And then she had 3 boys, and she raised these 3 boys to be crooks. And it was a criminal family, but they would do sophisticated big jobs. She was the boss, she was the matriarch of that family, and they would do big jobs. It's a great series. It's called Animal House I don't know if Netflix has it. I'm watching it on a certain channel, but it was really good. I think you'll enjoy it. But that was kind of Ma Barker's thing. Her husband and her 4 sons, they were all criminals. And these heists led to murder. They soon captivated the press, and they were also public enemies in the Midwest. But it took a bad turn for the Barkers in 1927 when one of their sons, Herman, committed suicide. He took his own life because he didn't want to be arrested. Shortly thereafter, the 3 sons, they all ended up in prison. And Arizona faced some lean years. Her husband was gone, her sons were gone, she wasn't making any money. But then Fred gets out of prison, and upon his release, they go through another crime spree. They start robbing and shooting and killing and doing all that again. And then both of them, her and her son, were killed when the FBI stormed her hideout in Lake Weir, Florida on January 8th, 1935. And her role in the Barker gang has been a matter of debate. A lot of her family members said no, she could never have been involved in that. That's not who she was. But the evidence showed differently, and she really was the leader of that gang. And by the way, J. Edgar Hoover called her, quote, the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade. Very, very interesting. She was the most resourceful, vicious, dangerous criminal in the last decade. Now, at that time, we had Al Capone was around, Lucky Luciano, we had Mazzaria, we had Maranzano, we had all those Italian guys that he would never admit that they were part of a criminal enterprise, never wanted to go after the Mafia, but he called this woman the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal of the last decade. J. Edgar Hoover. You know, what does that show you? Again, I said it in one of my videos. I think he was afraid to go after the mob because they were too sophisticated. He didn't think he would win, and he was trying to protect the image of the FBI. That's number one. Number two, they had to have some dirt on him, without a doubt, because there's no way he could have there was so much crime going on, and only the local police were handling it with the mob at that time. The FBI wouldn't get involved. The feds didn't get involved. Elliot Ness, you know, part of the IRS or something at that time, got involved against Capone, but the FBI wouldn't touch it. And that was from J. Edgar Hoover. But yet he calls Ma Barker, you know, the most resourceful and vicious criminal of the time. So that's that. Last but not least, somebody that you're familiar with, and we've talked about before, I think, was Virginia Hill. And she was known as the Flamingo. She was the queen of the gangster moles. She became very notorious as the girlfriend of who? None other than Bugsy Siegel. Now, she came from a very poor background. I think at one time she said until she was 17 years old, she didn't even have enough money to buy shoes. She was born in Alabama. She was raised in Georgia. She moved to Chicago because she was looking to be an actress. Why she went to Chicago and initially not Los Angeles, I don't know, but she went to Chicago. And she was looking to make money, and she wanted fame. She was into that. And she did get involved in something, but she went to work as an accountant for Al Capone. I don't think too many people knew that. Virginia Hill was an accountant for a short time for Al Capone. Then she moved to LA. She wanted to be an actress. She was pursuing her actress ambitions, and it was during that time in LA that she met with Bugsy Siegel. She soon became his lover. I think you know the story. When they went out in Vegas, he named a flamingo after her, and you remember that story. Well, when Bugsy Siegel got killed and they questioned her, she said, look, I was with him. I didn't know he was a gangster. I didn't know anything about anything. I had no involvement in the hotel or any of those shenanigans that were going on. She played that card. And eventually she left and she went to Austria and she committed suicide, an overdose of sleeping pills, I think. So very sad story. You know, who knows if she was really involved with Bugsy at the hotel. I don't know. We saw it depicted differently in the movie, but who knows. But Virginia Hill, very, very real person, certainly was involved with Bugsy Siegel, and again, met pretty sad ending. So that's it for today. You have 6 women that in their own right were pretty notorious. I don't agree with any of it. I don't think women should be involved in street crimes or any crimes in any shape or form. Not because they're not capable. Once again, I just hold women in higher esteem. It's a man's dirty work. It's not for women. And if people argue with me about that, it'll be very interesting to hear that. I want to see if we get some of the feminists, so-called feminists, to come at me for that and say, well, no, we should be involved in crime. We can do it as well as the guys. It would be a great argument. I'd love to debate that. But anyway, that's it for today. So how do I always leave you people? The same way. Be safe. Please do that. Be healthy. I really mean this. God bless every one of you, and thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And yes, I'll see you next time.